Hello all you people out there in TV land. My name is CB Studios, also known as Kurt, and today I'm coming at you with another horror cosplay video. And you've probably already worked out what's going on, hence the Freddy vs. Jason shirt and the Freddy vs. Jason Freddy mask and the Freddy vs. Jason Freddy glove and then the Freddy sweater in the background. That's right, we're talking about Jason X today. We're talking about Freddy vs. Jason today, and specifically my Freddy vs. Jason Freddy cosplay. Now, I've done a video previously on this wonderful glove, and I'm going to say wonderful because I made it, and I think it's wonderful. This is my Freddy vs. Jason Freddy Krueger glove. This is actually built out of the remnants of a Ruby's Supreme Edition metal Freddy glove. The only remaining pieces are actually the fingertips and the blades. Everything else has been rebuilt from scratch with the accurate leather glove and the nice little weird ring pull that does nothing, and it's on a NECA hand because it displays well. And I've done a video on this, and I really liked that video, and a lot of people really enjoyed it too. But one of the things that I did detail, don't fall down, one of the things I did detail in that video is I did some worn shots at the very end of my Freddy Krueger costume. And I had some people ask about that, and I had some emails, and I had people on social media just be like, hey, can you tell us about that? So that's what I'm going to do, is I'm going to show you the bits and pieces that I used for my Freddy vs. Jason Freddy Krueger costume, give you an idea on where to get these sort of pieces, and how to do your own, and in my opinion, how to do a really fun one. So to begin with, for Freddy Krueger, the big thing, the make or break for this costume is going to be the face. Now, I don't say mask because you do have options other than masks, they're just not as simple and not as straightforward. Freddy Krueger's makeup, at least for Robert Englund, throughout the 1980s, 90s, and Freddy vs. Jason, was a foam latex prosthetic. So the way that is it's a head cast done of Robert. They then sculpt in clay the design for the makeup, split that into sections, make molds of the outside and the inside. They inject a product called foam latex, different to regular latex. That's all fucking vinyl. That Freddy, that's a latex. Different to regular latex. It's a very, very soft product. The closest thing I could use to describe it is it's basically like a makeup sponge. And it's molded in these pieces, it's pre-painted and then applied down to Robert's head, and that gives a huge amount of movement and flexibility, and it's really, really cool, and that's why Freddy looks as great as he does. Unfortunately, if you want to go that route, you do need to really have a life cast of yourself done. Have somebody, either yourself or an artist, sculpt that makeup onto that bust, split everything down, cast up all the pieces. It's basically like baking a rubber souffle. It's a complete fucking nightmare, and the wrong kind of nightmare, and I would not recommend doing it. It's one of those things that I've always wanted to do, is a life cast of myself and do Freddy Krueger makeup, but it's nearly 20 years and I still haven't fucking done it, so... Actually, no, it is 20 years and I haven't fucking done it. Sick. Next option is going to be a silicone mask. Now, silicone masks are quite expensive. They can be. They do range in price and thus range in quality. This I've had for pretty much a decade now, which is a horrifying thought to think. It was Halloween 2013 when I got this guy, and this is a Versus Inferno mask from WFX, and this was one of the cheapest options for Freddy Krueger masks around at the time. Now, the reason I've chosen silicone is very flexible. It moves quite like makeup. It's quite stretchy. It's very comfortable, and it sort of sits really tight against your head, and it's the closest you can get to prosthetics without actually having prosthetics. Now, this is not the most accurate Freddy Krueger nowadays. There are many people who do Freddy Krueger masks, and honestly, the most accurate Versus Freddy is going to be Dark Ride FX or Dark Ride mask. His Versus Freddy is absolutely unparalleled, but with that absolute accuracy, there also comes a price. I think back when the dollar didn't suck for US to Australian dollars, I think I paid a couple $100, maybe $250, $300, something around that. These guys are still available and they're still fairly budget, but if you're going for a Dark Ride, you're $600, $700, $800 secondhand US for a Dark Ride mask. I'd love to get one. Eventually, I will probably try and get one. It's not really high on my priorities list. This one looks pretty great. You do have a couple of other places that do silicone Freddy Krueger masks. The ones that come to mind are going to be Immortal Masks. Did a Freddy Krueger, a licensed Freddy Krueger silicone mask for HalloweenCostumes.com many years ago. They are long sold out. They do not exist anymore, but a photo is going to go in here. And it looked okay, and I've seen some repaints of it that look absolutely stellar. The licensor decided to go for a flatter paint job than what it really needed, which is a shame. You've also got Breathless Effects. I believe it's Breathless Effects. I'll throw the thing in down here, who does an amazing Part 5, absolutely jaw-dropping Part 5. There's been some other independent makers who have done other pieces, other one-off masks, or done a small run. And then I believe also Evolution masks or Evolution Effects masks have done a couple of different Freddys. They don't seem to sell them as of the last time I checked, which admittedly has been a couple of months, but they did some fantastic masks back in the day. And then you do also have companies like Composite Effects or CFX Masks who do their extra toasty or burny or whatever their knockoff Freddy Krueger design was. That's a really cool looking one, and that's got some fantastic movement. You've got a heap of options. Now you can also go for just your standard latex masks. They're not super comfortable, but they are cheap and they're very easy to get a hold of. You can get them for like 50, 60 bucks around Halloween. If you want to try and cut one of those ones up, repaint it, use it for prosthetics, absolutely go ahead. You've got a huge amount of options with that. And your mileage will vary. And then you can also do your finally hand-applied makeup, which is how I started out when I did Freddy Krueger way back in the early 2000s. Photos in here. I actually used to use latex and tissue paper applied to my face. I had a bald cap over the top, well before the days of the beard. And that went okay, but obviously you got to put a whole lot of effort into painting that prosthetic as you go. It takes a couple of hours to do the full makeup. It's a tedious job sometimes, so your mileage will vary. My hat is a really cheap Stanton brand fedora style hat. It is a crushable style, which is completely the wrong style for Freddy Krueger, and it did have a wire band in the brim, which I cut off, and that's why it has such a weird floppy sort of shape. You do have many options when it comes to hats. You've just got to find one that looks close enough for what you want. I will be upgrading this eventually. In fact, my Indiana Jones hat looks even better on this. It just doesn't fit because it's designed to fit my head and not the Freddy Krueger bust. What I will say though is there are people in the Freddy Krueger glove making scene and mask and costume scene who do custom hats specifically to match different hats from the movies, as the hat does change for every movie. Seek them out if you'd like. They are an excellent, excellent option. Never used one, so I can't speak for the quality, but I'm sure if you ask around, somebody will pipe up. Next up, we're going to continue on with the concept of the Freddy makeup. And one of the big things that a lot of people forget, one of the smaller things that's not really important, but it is really important, is going to be the left hand. Now, Freddy's left hand is also burned. Depending on the movie you're going for, it may just be a small patch on the back of the hand, maybe the whole thing that's done. Companies like Darkride FX and WFX Masks do a silicone left hand. Now, this is basically a giant rubber glove, but we are sculpted to look like Freddy's burned hand. It goes all the way down to the fingers and halfway down the forearm. And this actually came as part of the set with my Freddy. And it's real simple, and I'll show you how stretchy this goes. It sits down on your forearm. You get your fingers right into the ends. And all of a sudden, you've got Freddy's burned hand. Now, the grip on this is not fantastic. You can pick up things and you can use the hand, obviously. It's a little loose around my forearm. It is designed to stretch around larger arms, but for smaller hands and smaller forearms, your mileage may vary. It does have an excellent paint job. I have touched this one up as well. The paint job that came on this arm and on the mask were the basic paint jobs for this one. There are deluxe paint jobs, or at least there were back in the day. But this hand works perfectly. It's cast in the same silicone as the face, so the skin tone matches brilliantly. And it's really, really comfortable. I will say, however, because you're wearing a full rubber glove, your arm does get sweaty, and you do have sweat that pools in the fingers. Next up is Freddy Krueger's glove. The most, well, one of the most important parts of Freddy's costume. Now, if you are based in the United States, your options are plentiful. If you're just going for a one-off cosplay or something that you're only going to wear every now and again, you could totally get one of the deluxe Freddy Krueger gloves from Rubies. They are okay. They work fairly well for what they are, but with a little bit of work, you can make them look absolutely fantastic. There's a whole video on this one on my channel. It's going to be linked at the end of the video if you'd like to see a little bit more in depth on this. But honestly, you could start out with just the metal Rubies Supreme glove, and that would be totally fine for a Freddy Krueger costume. I would certainly recommend replacing the leather glove underneath. But if you're going out to a convention or you're going to Halloween parties, you don't want to be walking around with a metal glove flicking around on your wrist. So I would recommend picking up the plastic Rubies Freddy Krueger glove. Now these are, again, fairly easily available in the United States. They are not expensive. They do come with an absolutely dog shit leather glove on here as well. I don't know what these costume companies have against having hand articulation or any sort of movement, but the armature on these is pretty okay for the price. They are a really lightweight plastic, but they do have really nicely chromed blades. Now there are a couple of versions of these. Do be aware when you have a look at the plastic clamshell hanging on the shelves at Spirit Halloween, that if you're going for Freddy vs. Jason, this one with the 3 rivets on the back of the hand and this sort of armature is certainly the most accurate that you can get straight off the shelf. One of the things that I do recommend with these ones though is pulling the whole armature apart, taking all of the rivets out, taking the plastic glove off, because your hand articulation is pretty terrible, but these can be made to look really, really good. When I say they can be made to look really, really good, this is how they are straight out of the package. And this is the same armature that what I use at conventions. Now what I've done with this one is I have obviously replaced it onto a new leather work glove, but I pulled this whole armature apart. I sanded off the really thick brown paint that's on there. I've polished down the blades. I'll see if I can get it in the light. Kinda. I polished down the blades with steel wool to give them a slightly more matte or brushed finish, and I reassembled the whole thing to fit my hand a little bit better. I've also riveted it onto the back plate, and I painted the whole armature with a flat black, and then dry brushed it with several different colors of copper and brass acrylic paints mixed together to give it that nice aged copper look. And honestly, they look pretty great. It certainly works, and it's not until you're right up close on top of it that you can realize that it's actually plastic. These are safe. Both of these gloves are safe. They don't have any edges on the blades, but this one is entirely plastic, and it is con safe. And it looks quite good for a Freddy Krueger costume. I recommend going this route if you are doing a Freddy vs. Jason version. You could probably custom make one with plastic blades pretty easily as well, but I mean, Rubies have done most of the work for you, and I don't think it sucks for, I don't know, like $25, I think, is what this all cost. Leather gloves are cheap, paint's cheap, it's just your time and some rivets. Next up is going to be one of the harder portions to find. I remember when I started doing my Freddy Krueger costume, these were few and far between, especially in Australia. Next up is going to be the sweater. This is a Spirit Halloween unlicensed Freddy Krueger sweater. I picked this one up in the United States in 2016. I believe they do change every now and again, but it was maybe 35 bucks. It was fairly cheap. It is a knitted sweater, and it came brand spanking new perfect, and I have gone through and aged and dirtied it down. This is one of the things that I will mention with this costume is your hat, your boots, your pants, your gloves, and your sweater all need to be weathered, otherwise you are not going to look right. Freddy vs. Jason, he's very grubby. When I say you need to weather your costume parts, this is my sweater that's weathered, and this is the exact same sweater without weathering. I bought this one as a daily wear sweater because I kind of wanted a Freddy sweater I could wear, you know, out and about, and they work really nicely. It's more of a heavy knitted shirt than a sweater, but as you can see, it's pretty bright as far as colors go. It's a very bright olive green and a very, very, very striking red. And so just a little bit of sandpaper, a knife to tear up the collar and cut that through and make it just a little bit rougher, roughened up the cuffs, and I went through with black matte spray paint and I slowly weathered the whole costume over a couple of days. I made sure I did passes of it and made sure I wasn't getting like splotches or spots where I didn't want them. And just that little bit of weathering makes this thing look a whole lot more legit. You need it to look like you were burned in a fire, and I feel like I'm fairly close with that. Now I will say that my sweater is not completely accurate. Freddy's sweater actually has big ribs down it for the Freddy vs. Jason version, and it is a slightly darker color scheme. But I didn't want to spend the money on a custom knit sweater. There are some amazing artisans out there who do make custom knit, screen accurate Freddy Krueger sweaters. I've never bought one, so I can't recommend them, but I have seen some that look absolutely phenomenal. One day, I'd like to upgrade this one to a really screen-accurate Freddy Krueger, Freddy vs. Jason sweater, but it's not really high on my list right now. And these are pretty cheap for what they are. I don't have to worry about my glove tearing holes in it. I don't have to worry about having to weather it. I don't have to go through the anxiety of having to cut up the bottom edge of it to make it nice and rough. That's my Freddy Krueger sweater. Now that we've discussed the sweater, the next most important thing is going to be pants. Freddy's pants and Freddy vs. Jason were a pair of Dockers pants, I believe. I think that's the brand. I don't know, I haven't really looked into it too much. They're just a pair of regular fit slacks. I believe in the movie they were technically an olive green that was weathered down, but I want my costume to look correct in person. I don't need it to look like it did on the screen because there's a lot of color grading for Freddy vs. Jason and you very rarely see his pants. What I did was I went down to my local Kmart here in Australia. It's still here. You can go to a Walmart or something like that, and I found straight stretch chinos. Now I went straight stretch because I wanted to be able to stretch a little bit, and I actually sized up a couple of sizes for these ones just to get that looser fit that Robert's pants have. The other thing that I did was I threw them around on the ground, on the bricks, and then went and weathered them in with some black spray paint as well when I was doing the sweater. And that just gives it this really nice sort of almost mechanics look where they're just a little bit more weathered and aged. They don't need to be completely shredded, but just not pristine and pressed is really, really important. That's about all you need for pants. They don't need to be anything crazy. You just want to get fairly close to the screen accurate color and cut and make sure that they look correct on you. And I can't stress that enough. You can go through and make your costume completely screen accurate with all the existing brands and everything, but your body type's almost certainly going to be different from Robert Englund's. If it's not, you're really lucky, but you're gonna have to really dress for you as well. Pants are one of those areas that you can take into consideration when you're making a costume. May not be screen accurate, but it may look more accurate on you. The other part for Freddy for the pants is going to be a belt. Typically, I would use just a black leather dress belt, one of these sort of ones with your D-shaped buckle, silver buckle. I don't actually know off the top of my head what type of belt Robert wore for Freddy vs. Jason, but honestly, your sweater's going to cover it for the most part. This is actually not the belt that I wear for my Freddy Krueger. This is my Ash Williams belt from my Ash vs. the Evil Dead costume, and you won't see it under the sweater. It's fine. It'll work. Just a belt. It's just a belt, man. And finally, we come to the last portion of this costume, or at least of my costume, and that is really important. It's the boots. Footwear makes a costume, and the right footwear can make a costume look way, way cooler than just wearing a pair of New Balance sneakers. So for my Freddy Krueger, I wear this pair of boots that I've owned since high school. These are a pair of Vietnam-era GPs. They're just your standard, I believe, Australian military boots. I have never had these resold. I've refinished them once, I think. They're really nice and rough. They've got chunks out of the toes, the heel's all worn, the paint on the eyelets scratched off. They're all sort of weathered, and they're just this nice high work boot. I've used these for every version of my Freddy Krueger costume except for the very, very, very first time because they just look like Freddy's boots. I wear these for my Jason X, which I will document at some point in the future. I wear these with my Ghostface. I wore these with my Ash before I got my screen-accurate Ash boots. They are boots of 1,000 uses, and a plain black pair of these sort of military boots are fantastic. If you're going for a Freddy Krueger costume, I really recommend getting a second-hand pair of boots. These came from an army disposal store in Brisbane City, and that sort of aging and wear you just can't fake easily. Going for something like this that's already broken in and already aged, already really, really nicely fucked up, makes your job a whole lot easier. And these just sell the idea that it's a Freddy Krueger and it's not just a straight-off-the-rack Halloween costume. So that's all for the costume parts, but now you've got to dress the part. One of the things I'm going to show you is how I put on a silicone mask, because I did have some people ask about that in the last time. I'll then show how the rest of the costume goes on. We'll do a little bit of a time lapse of me putting the whole thing on, and you can see that, and then we'll do some warm shots for the end. Now, one of the things with silicone masks is they do muffle your voice just a little bit, and with facial hair, they don't stick quite as closely to your skin as they really should, but I'm not going to shave for a YouTube video because fuck that. I'll show you how to put the mask on, but I will go through now and just say thank you very, very much for watching. I hope you guys really enjoyed this video. If you'd like to leave a comment down the bottom, I'd love to hear it. If you own a silicone mask, if you have bought silicone masks from any of the makers, or any of the makers that I haven't mentioned, please do let me know down in the comments. Tell me what your favorite Freddy Krueger look is. My personal favorite is Freddy vs. Jason because it was the movie that really brought Freddy Krueger Krueger to me. I remember seeing the ads for that and being super captivated, and it's been all fucking downhill from there. Thanks very much for watching, guys. Throw me a like, throw me a comment, throw me a subscribe, and let's get into dressing up as Freddy Krueger. Alright, so I've got my pants and boots on, as you probably can't see, because fucking you can't see my legs, and that's not my problem, that's yours. You can imagine my feet, you fucking weirdos. We have the silicone mask off the foam head. Now, really important thing about silicone masks is, as you can see, they're very, very stretchy. They are very elastic rubber, and they are quite heavy. The issue that a lot of people do have with these is you can't put them on like a regular latex Halloween mask. Grabbing it by the bottom edge and just reefing it down over your head, you're going to rip at any of these openings. Silicone's really, really strong if it's one consistent thickness, but these rarely are. That's why you'll see masks being advertised as having power mesh inside, which is just little pieces of mesh that are cast into the silicone or applied afterwards that stop that rip. They'll only stretch so far. The mouth on mine is starting to split just a little bit, so I will be careful, but I'll show you a correct way, not the correct way, to put on a silicone mask. As you can see, I got my whole arm up inside this Freddy Krueger face, and this has been talcum powdered on the inside. I've just moved my microphone down lower so that I don't completely molest your ears. So the easiest way to put a silicone mask on, and safest way, is to basically fold the neck piece back and put both of your hands into the head, as you can see there. You want to stretch it with your wrists. You don't want to pull from small areas, you want a large surface area that's causing that stretch. We stretch it so it'll go over the head, and as it's talcum powdered, it should just pop straight on. Now do bear in mind I've got no product in my hair, because that's gonna make things much, much harder. And it's not going to sit perfectly on my face because of my beard. If I was clean shaven, it's going to sit much, much closer to my face. But let's go with this. And that's it. You can adjust it to fit your face a little bit better. But all of a sudden, you are Freddy Krueger.